Meet Sophia, who in this morning woke up thinking it would be a great day, but instead was abruptly met with the too hot heat of their environment. So they thought, okay, I'll get a drink of water to refresh and hopefully cool off. But instead, the water tasted bad and actually ended up making them sick. But they thought, okay, I'm still too hot. What else can I do? I want to head to the river and possibly cool off in another way. So happily they turned to the door to leave and head to the river. But they are greeted by the gray skies full of pollution, haze, smoke, unsure if it really is even good for them to be breathing that. But they decide they still want to go and enjoy some water for the day and decide to continue to head to the river. Once they got to the river, they were super excited, but immediately saw the brown, dark waters that were in front of them, thick, full of sludge, and upset. And although they tried, their needs could not be met. This reality is the unfair lived experiences of those who neighbor dying factories. But for what reason should people like Sophia have to suffer through such negative, inhumane conditions?
In the mid-19th century, synthetic dyes were introduced into the textile industry. These dyes were proven to be more efficient, cost-effective, and last longer than natural dyes. Thus, natural dyeing techniques were rapidly phased out and synthetic dyes took over the world. However, these new exciting dyes resulted in detrimental, hazardous effects. Due to how the dye industry operates, wastewater from the dyeing process is dumped into rivers and streams. According to the World Bank, 17 to 20% of worldwide industrial water pollution is a direct byproduct of textile dyeing and treatments. The dyes make the wastewater dark, full of sludge and sewage, cause a similar consistency to tar, and emit an odor. This wastewater is full of chemicals, salts, and heavy metals which cause polluted water to darken, not allowing sunlight to enter and lessening the amount of oxygen in the water, making surrounding rivers uninhabitable to organisms. If a person is exposed to this polluted water, it can lead to cancers, illnesses, and skin problems. Even if a person does not come in direct contact with the water, they can still ingest these chemicals through animal products and even vegetables due to the effects of bioaccumulation.
Due to these disastrous environmental impacts, tens of thousands of factories have been shutting down across the globe. In 2017, 80,000 factories in China alone were fined. Although better for the environment, these shutdowns put many people out of work, raised dyeing prices since factories have to pay off these economic penalties, and left textile factories with no means to get their dyes from. At that time, China's environmental laws were seeking to foster healthier air, waters, and overall living conditions for the Chinese citizens. For the first time, people were able to look up and see blue skies and swim in clean rivers.
These environmental laws are going to continue to become stricter as the textile industry rapidly grows.
In Western nations, primarily the United States, the demand for fast fashion is drastically increasing. With quick trend cycles, the overproduction of clothes, the single-use mindset with clothing items, clothing utilization is going down while clothing sales are increasing. This demonstrates the alarming rate at which consumers are buying, wearing an item of clothing only once or twice, and then getting rid of it briefly after purchase. Dye factories must match and maintain the production pace of the fashion industries. These factories will only continue to destroy communities and ecosystems.
As this worsens, our team, FunDyes, has decided to be on the preventative side of this climate iniquity. We can no longer wait on the governments and politicians to slowly wash away the surface of the dyeing industry's failures. It must start at the root, which is where we decide to start, quite literally at the root, or mycelium as we call it in the fungi world.
Our company, FunDyes, is utilizing fungus to produce a colorful, cost-effective, and sustainable alternative to harmful synthetic dyes used by leading fast fashion brands.
We chose mushrooms because
Mushrooms are the most rewarding alternative in the natural dyes market. Fungi is more efficiently obtained and farmed, has more variability in color, and is more cost-effective than other natural dyes, like agricultural waste, flowers, or bacteria. The mushrooms we ended up choosing go by the common names Spring King, producing orange, lobster mushroom, producing an orangey red, belly button, producing a green, blue chanterelle, producing a teal, and cinnamon bracket, producing a lilac color. We used these types of mushrooms on wool, cotton, and silk fabrics to obtain different colors. Thanks to Julie Beeler, the founder of the Mushroom Color Atlas, who is an expert in dyeing with mushrooms, we were able to find a comprehensive list of these mushrooms and the colors they produced on different fabrics. And we were able to use Julie's research to have a guiding hand in our dyeing process.
After choosing our mushrooms, now it's time to grow them. Through mushroom cultivation, we will be able to produce them at a mass scale. We plan to use the leftovers for bioremediation, bringing our product to the next level.
Our research for the use of mushrooms for bioremediation has been fruitful. We have found many different ways in which mushrooms can be useful when removing pollution from different aspects of our environment. Anywhere from removing E. coli, river streams, all the way to removing metals from the soil. Once our mushrooms were ready, we started experimenting with the colors and ratios. We tried 2 different methods of preparing our mushrooms, freezing and rehydrating.
Then, we prepared the dye bath by adding mordants of alum and iron into a 65 degrees Celsius pot of water and stirring. Then, we poured our mushrooms into the dye bath, where we are experimenting with a 1-to-1 ratio of mushroom to fabric. While our mixture will be brewing for the next hour, I'm going to talk about our product's life cycle. First, mushroom cultivation will happen over about 3 months in our farm. Leftover mushrooms will be used for bioremediation in lands that have been polluted by the dyeing industry. Then, mushrooms will be used for dye manufacturing. After, excess dye bath wastewater, unlike synthetic dyes that would be dumped into rivers or sent to treatment plants, can be used for soil remediation for plants that need acidic soil or to make paint pigments. After, our procured wool will be spun and dyed. After, we will fully prepare the wool and put it into packaging to be sent around the world to companies using wool to make stylish and fashionable clothing. Lastly, this wool can be decomposed and thus the cycle can start again.
Here I'm adding the fabric in to dye, and we're going to let it sit for 24 hours. Finally, hang the fabrics up to completely dry. Now the dye process is complete. These fabrics are completely non-toxic and safe for the skin. Crazy how all of that was done in under 24 hours. That was so easy, right? Anyone can do it.
Here are a few of the outcomes of dyeing with wool, silk, and cotton fabrics. The top left side depicts the wool and cotton fabrics that are what they look like before being dyed. Moving over, there was some cotton that we used and tried to dye with cinnamon bracket mushrooms as well as belly button mushrooms, but none of the colors produced were anything like the green or teal they should have been. We have silk, where we tried to use some of the cinnamon bracket mushrooms. However, it was not very vibrant once we finished dyeing the silk, which was originally a white color. Some of the reasons that we think that our dyes were not working very well on the fabrics is because of, one, potentially burning the dye bath when trying to keep it in a temperature range of 60 to 70 degrees Celsius. Also, we were concerned that maybe the mushrooms were too old and not fresh enough for use in dyeing. These last 2 fabrics turned out pretty well, a pink color that we're proud of, and probably the best color that we received from all of our dyeing experiments. FunDyes met with Dr. Yulo Shea, a distinguished professor in the College of Biological and Agricultural Engineering. She is also head of the Textiles Graduate Group at UCDavis. While talking with Dr. Shea, we wanted to ask her opinion on why our mushroom dyes did not produce such bright colors. She's a very strong supporter of natural dyes and said, quote, "The colors you create are very complex, very soothing, and very pleasant, unlike synthetic dyes," end quote. However, she did say that, quote, "Dyeing is more challenging than you think. There's a lot of science behind it," end quote. Dr. Shea told us one of the most important steps in the dyeing process is to scour the fiber in preparation for dyeing. She said, quote, "Scouring is the #1 way to treat fabrics," end quote. In conclusion with our meeting with Dr. Shea, we determined that we probably should have scoured more of our fibers before dyeing them in the mushroom dye baths. At the end of our meeting, Dr. Shea told us to keep our heads up and that, quote, "Biodesign is all about being upbeat," end quote. We had a good time talking with Dr. Shea, and we look forward to implementing some of her ideas in future dyeing endeavors. There are not many risks associated with dyeing with mushrooms. However, some could be argued. For example, inhaling some of the mordant used to make the mordant bath in the dyeing process could be damaging to your lungs. It comes in powdered form. Also, since the dye baths are being boiling temperature and the water is very hot, the user must be very conscious of making sure they do not harm themselves with the heat involved.
Moving forward, We will continue testing the dye process and start experimenting with bioremediation, as well as deepen our understanding of scalability and about the possibilities of partnering with neighboring communities in restoration of lands and ecology and thus the economy. Communities have the right to access safe, clean waters, usable rich land, and clear skies. FunDyes aims to mend the fashion industry, one mushroom at a time.